today's webinar, Fathers and Work-Life Family Balance. Today's webinar is presented by Jewish Family and Children's Service, Parents in a Pinch, and Magic Beans. Jewish Family and Children's Service is Greater Boston's leading and trusted provider of comprehensive human services. Parents in a Pinch is an award-winning backup care and nanny placement company that provides a safety net for working parents whenever gaps in their child care or elder care arrangements occur. And Magic Beans is a toy store with more than 5 locations in the Boston area that caters to the needs of infants, toddlers, children, and their parents. Today's webinar will be presented by Alan Jacobson, who I'm delighted to have here with us.
Glad to be here.
Alan, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'd love to. I am a psychologist, and I also went back to school to get my MBA. And I have 2 kids. They are 8 and 7 years old, and absolutely wonderful. And that's also why this topic is close to my heart.
And I'm here co-presenting with Alan. My name is Jennifer Meyerhart. I work at Jewish Family and Children's Services. I specialize in working with families who are at high risk for education, developmental, and social issues. Today's webinar topics will be presented through slides. This webinar can only be heard through your phone. Attendees' voices will be muted. Questions can be submitted in the dialog box and will either be answered individually in the dialog box or be addressed by the group by myself and Alan at the end of the presentation. For today's webinar, we are going to begin with a poll question. So our first question is, how many extra hours of work do you or your partner need to do each year for your job? I'm sorry, each week, I apologize, for your job. I'm going to wait a moment as the poll answers come in, and then we'll share the results. So approximately 10% of you indicated that you need to do approximately, or your partner, between 0 and 5 extra hours a week. 30% of you between 5 and 10 hours a week. 20% of you between 10 and 15 hours. And a large 40% between 15 to 20 extra hours a week work each week. I'm sure Alan is going to address this in a moment, but before we do that, we're going to ask one more poll question. The second poll question, how many days per week do you need to bring work home? And again, I'm going to wait a moment while you share your responses in your response box. Again, very interesting responses. 11% of you say that 1 day a week you have to bring work home. 11% of you say that 2 days a week you have to bring home. 11% of you say that 3 days you have to bring home. And a majority, 67%, say that 5 days a week you need to bring work home with you. So Alan, I'm sure you're going to talk about this a little bit.
Excellent. So let me share with you some statistics that actually, when I look at those poll results, they're not too surprising. But I also, before I even start that, I want to congratulate all of you. And the reason for that is this is one of those problems that can tend to be invisible and can tend to be something that people just aren't aware of. When I first saw that and signed up to present on this, my fear was that we wouldn't have a lot of people in the audience because a lot of times people don't realize how important the idea of striking a balance between work and your outside life is. And those of you who are on this call obviously see that importance, and I want to thank you for joining us. But here are some statistics. A lot of this has to do with the economy. I think that this topic is very pertinent right now due to the economic situation. As you can see, 10% of working dads, it used to be a dual earner family, and now just one person is working. That creates a lot of additional stress. And the third bullet also speaks to that as well. Now, still, 42% of working dads say they're the sole providers in their home. that may have been a smaller number before the economy, before the decline in the economy, but probably still a fairly large number. So many of you may be in that, may be stung by some of these statistics, maybe in the groups that this is really stressful for. I want to highlight the fact that you don't have to be in any of these groups to be struggling with work-life balance. It can be a dual earner family. It can be a family where one partner is working and one partner isn't, and striking a work-life balance isn't restricted to one group or the next. So you all spoke to this in your poll. As you can see on this slide, you did a nice job with your poll. 63% of working dads say they routinely work more than 40 hours a week. Let me tell you something interesting about that statistic. That was a nationwide statistic. I spent some time trying to find, I'm assuming a lot of you are in Massachusetts, and I was trying to find a Massachusetts statistic. My gut feeling, and anecdotally, I would tell you that first bullet, we would see a higher percentage if we concentrated on Massachusetts. There's just something about our state that says that the way we work is we bring work home, or we work more than 40 hours a week. It seems to be the way things work here. 31% of working dads report bringing work home out of necessity. Again, those of you on this call, maybe because this is an issue that you feel is particularly pertinent to you, we saw a much higher percentage in our poll. But at least a third of people say they have to bring work home. And another third say that it's weekends get affected by having to bring work home. And this is, certainly these statistics point to something. And again, I want to emphasize that I think if we looked at Massachusetts and if we looked at some of the demographics around here, we'd probably see even higher numbers. It's certainly a problem. So here's where it gets complicated, and what I want to say up front is there may be some of you who are on this line who have grown kids or don't have kids, and that doesn't mean that you're not part of the group that we're talking to as far as striking a work-life balance. But those of you that do have kids, as you can see, a whole lot of dads felt like they couldn't spend time with their kids because of work. And this might be, as the first bullet says, sort of routine, daily stuff, putting the kids to bed, reading them a story, being there for dinner. That's what the first bullet speaks to. The second bullet speaks to more event-related stuff. People have to miss events that their kids are in, these things that really can't be replaced. You can't get them back. Seeing a video doesn't sort of fill that gap for you. So certainly this is for those of you with kids, this may be an issue that stings particularly. So let's talk for a minute about how this issue has evolved over the past, say, 40 or 50 years. And as you can see from, as you can read through the bullets, and I'm not just going to repeat what's written here, but there's been two major changes in the way we've looked at the father's role in the family. And the first thing is that the role of dads in raising their kids and being a nurturer, not just a provider, has become more clear. I don't think it's become more important because I think it's always been this way, but I think it's been more clear to society, clear to all of us that dads that dads play a nurturing role in raising their kids. There is certainly, over the past 40 years, every statistic you could look at will show that there's more dual earners. And even the dual earners that existed about 40 years ago, it was often that one of the people who was working maybe part-time, was working a job that was maybe in the home, and was working a job that didn't put a lot of pressure on the family. Now when we talk about dual earners, we're really talking about two people who are in pressure-filled jobs. Equally stressful jobs as each other. And the last bullet speaks to something that's really interesting, is that the traditional family dynamic has faded a little bit, and many of us in the field would say that's actually a wonderful thing, is that there's no stereotype for what dads are supposed to do. There are single dads who are raising their kids. There are dads who are the secondary earners. There are dads who are equal earners. This was a little less common 40 years ago. This is actually a wonderful development, but it certainly has implications when we're talking about work-life balance. And by the way, I hope that you're either submitting your questions or keeping your questions in mind. This is a very different kind of presentation. Usually by now I'd be answering questions, and so please make sure that you're submitting questions, or at least having them in mind for we'll definitely leave enough time for that. So this next slide goes along with the last slide. What I want to highlight is two things here. Those of you who are on this call may have a job that doesn't allow you to just sort of work your shift and go home without taking work home with you. There are certain jobs that allow for that. A lot of you are probably in the kinds of jobs where your role is to get your job done. Your boss says, I don't care when you do it, how you do it, or where you do it. Your job is to do what's on your job description and get it done. These are the kind of jobs that are most challenging when it comes to work-life balance. There are other types of jobs, people that may not have joined us today, where it is a little bit easier to go in, work 8 hours, and come home, and there's nothing to bring home. It's probably not those of you who are in the audience today. One of the positives that we have here is that a lot of the research has shown over the past 20 or 25 years that the use of high-quality babysitters and child care is actually it doesn't harm kids, and in fact is just as good as being cared for by a family, particularly when it allows the family to have the economic stability that comes with allowing both or one parent to work a little bit more. So the balance between having to use a babysitter or child care and being able to have the family be financially stable is actually quite a good balance. And in the past, what some people, the error that often was made is that people avoided child care and babysitters so much that it actually affected the quality of life of the family because they really needed to be out of the home.
Alan, before you continue, we have another poll question. And this question is, what do you wish you had more time for? And again, there's some choices, and we'll wait till everyone's responded and share the results. So it looks like 36% of you, approximately a third of you, wish you had more time for yourself, 64% you and your partner, 82% your kids, obviously people put more than one response, 36% your friends, and 9% your work. What do you make of that, Alan?
I'm actually glad to see that there is so many of you voted more than once. As you're going to see coming up, it's the answer to this may be all of the above, or at least all of the first four, as far as what we need to make more time for in order to be healthy. So I've divided the solutions here into 3 steps, and one thing I want to caution you is I don't pretend to think that some of these are that easy. In a 20-minute or a half-an-hour webinar, it's easy to say what the solutions is. It's a little bit harder to say exactly how you might implement them, and some of these are easier than others. But they're divided into 3 steps, and the first step is what I call systems solutions, which basically means you're implementing something that affects your whole system, your whole life, the system involved in your life. So for example, as a lot of you said when you answered that poll question, which was great, is that you do need to make time for yourself, and you do need to make time for you and your partner to have a life together. The reason for this, sometimes people sacrifice that in order to spend all of their free time with their kids. And what happens is we really don't build up a reserve of patience, a reserve of understanding, a reserve of being able to trust and work with our partner to our optimal level that really comes only when we relax and take time for ourselves and take time to do the things that we need to do, maybe have a hobby or maybe something like that. Again, I'm not pretending to say that this is easy, but if your life is all work and the rest of your life is with your kids, you may not have the patience, you may not have the ability to sort of see through things like you might if you're able to take care of yourself and you and your partner are able to take care of yourselves. That also goes for external relationships. Many people with kids feel like their only external relationships are other families with the same age kids. So the conversation always drifts to the kids and the baseball team or the school or the town or whatever. It's very important that you have external relationships that aren't just revolving around your kids, that you have external relationships that give you a sense of support. The next two are a master family calendar is absolutely vital. Sometimes we try to remember everything that's going on. It's not just developing a master family calendar. It's actually setting time aside each week to go over the master family calendar. It's to make no assumptions about who's going to do what and who's going to do the other thing. It's deciding who's going to be with the kids at each time, at each important event, and all that kind of stuff, and being able then to look at it and assess and say, wait, I'm not involved as much as I'd like to be this week. Why don't I do, Thursday night, and I'll just find a way to get out of work early that day or something like that. It's not just developing the calendar, but it's really assessing it and going over it carefully. And then the last one is really important. When I work with families, I can tell you that there's a huge difference between those families who have a trusted set of babysitters and child care providers that they really like, that they feel know their kids really well, and that they truly feel they can leave their kids with and not lose any sleep and not worry about it and take care of the first three bullets here, and their kids are taken care of. Developing that trusted circle of child care providers is something that's well worth it and pays off. Now this step is extremely important, and these are the conversations with your partner that have to happen. And I want to highlight a few things on this page that are absolutely so important. The first bullet may be the most important thing. We spend a lot of time as couples trying to come to a conclusion of who is right and who is wrong and what's the exact way that we should come together in parenting our kids. Well, research has shown that as much as on a gut level that feels like the way to go, that's actually not the healthiest thing for kids. Because if one parent is parenting against his or her instincts or against what he or she feels is really important to him or her, what really happens is there develops a tension in the house that you can cut with a knife. So what's important is that you come to the conclusion that on some things you're going to agree, and where you disagree, there may be slightly different parenting styles, but you know what they are, you're aware of them, and it's peaceful as far as how you go about parenting your kids, even if you disagree a little bit. And the next to go with this is that you've absolutely, positively, when you do disagree, you have to disagree in private. Don't give any indication. This is where working on your parental poker face is so important. You can't disagree in front of the kids, and you can't negotiate your differences in front of the kids. When there are differences that mean we've got to really parent together on this, we do have to choose a way of parenting, negotiate that outside of, don't negotiate that in front of your kids. There should be a unified plan for how things are handled. And that's really vital for your stress level and to make sure that your kids see that unity.
And Alan, that master family calendar that you talked about, a lot of my families I work with have found that a great tool for negotiating with their partners, where they have the whole week laid in front of them. They can figure out who's doing what, maybe who's been absent more, out of, again, like you said, the earshot of the children, but it's a way to sort of really figure out how to make things work with some concrete.
Yep. The other thing that's such a good point, because the other thing that the master family calendar can do is that's how you can negotiate sometimes your parenting. So let's say I believe that kids should have a big dessert after every dinner, and my partner believes that kids should really eat very healthy and shouldn't have a big dessert after every dinner. Well, let's say on the calendar it says my job is going to be to feed the kids dinner on Thursday night. That's a perfect time to talk about, well, what do you think about dessert? Can we compromise and go with a medium-sized dessert or a small dessert? You know, I don't feel like I need to get all my way. I don't feel like you should get all your way. Let's negotiate some compromise. So the calendar can actually not just be about events, but can be about parenting as well. And here are some solutions that are important. This is advice to you, and advice that you can give your partner, which is that all communication between each other has to be two ways. And what I mean by that is you have to feel like you truly heard what the other person said, and you have to feel like they truly heard what you said. Again, this doesn't mean that you always have to agree, and there aren't times that you're going to find compromise and realize that not one of you is perfectly right. It does mean that you have to feel heard, and you have to pay attention to what the other person is saying. The next one is something that we don't do very well. One of the things our kids respond very, very well to, especially as they grow older, is that we talk about what's going on in our office. And here's why. We are great role models for our kids in the fact that we are working so hard. So if we flip this on its head a little bit, the fact that you're bringing work home, as you can see the guy in the picture, maybe he's doing a little bit of work. You've brought some work home. You work very hard. Your kids see how hard you work. Your kids see how much energy you have to put into your job. That's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, you're being a very, very strong and powerful role model for your kids. Here's the way to make it so it's not a negative, as if they just see it as, well, Dad has to work so much that he doesn't have any time for me. Talk to them a little bit about it. Tell them what you're doing. Really bring that idea that you're a role model into focus. Make them be a part of it. So actually when they see you working, they might even put a context to it. Have them visit your office so they can picture you when you have to work late in your office. Have them see the pictures of you, have them see the pictures of themselves that are in your office so they see, oh, well, he's having to work, but maybe every once in a while he's looking at the picture of me. Really bring your kids into your work life, and it's very beneficial to them, and you'll find it beneficial to yourself as well. And the next two, you really have to learn when to say no and when to play with the kids. This sort of is the obvious thing. We're all not very good at it. What I tell people in my office is this: rank yourself today. So if all of you did this, you rank yourself today on a scale of 1 to 10 of how good you are at saying no when things come up at work, how good you are at playing with your kids now and putting off your work. Rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 and make your goal being that every month you're going to rank 1 point better than you did the month before. Make it a game with yourself.
Alan, these were some great points you shared. I certainly learned a lot today. I'm sure people who have been listening have some questions. If you have questions, please send us your questions via the question box on the right side of your screen. We will answer as many questions as we have time for in the time remaining. There's about 6 or 7 minutes remaining, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible.
So one of the questions that's been asked is a great question, and it has to do with the use of smartphones. And I have 2 separate answers about this. I think that the good thing about smartphones, and I may be stating the obvious, is these, unlike in previous times when we didn't have these, the ability to take our office around with us, we sometimes had to make a choice. Could we go to the soccer game or the baseball game, or do we have to stay home because we knew that there was an important call or an important, some sort of message? At that point, it was voicemail coming in, and we would either have to stay at home or go to the game, but we really couldn't do both. The great thing about smartphones is it allows us to do both. It allows us to do some activities that in the past we wouldn't have been able to do because we couldn't take the office with us when something important was happening. What you really have to do to make it okay to use your smartphones is rationally think to yourself and maybe even make a list of exactly what the rules are for you as far as using the smartphone. In other words, are you going to answer every single email that comes in while you're at an activity with the kids or while you're in the living room and the kids are playing with you? Or have you decided that the only emails you're going to answer are the ones that you know ahead of time are urgent, the ones that you're waiting for, the ones that you absolutely have to answer? The same with answering the phone. Are you going to answer the phone whenever it rings? Do you have a short list of people? These are the only people that I'll answer the phone for when my kids are around. I think the key there is that smartphones are a good thing, but making rules for yourself so you're not sort of abusing the privilege and losing out on your kids' activities. Another question came in that said that someone said their partner doesn't appreciate how hard they have to work, and how can you get your partner to support you? That is also an excellent question. It's a question I hear all the time, and I usually give 2 or 3 different pieces of advice about that. The first piece of advice, if you're not already doing it, is to share a lot about what's going on at work. Share as much as you feel comfortable, as much as it's okay to share, given the limits of confidentiality or whatever else, because partners who are informed are more likely to understand why you have to spend so much time at work. That's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is make sure that there is a payoff. Make sure that your family understands why you have to work so hard. It could be something as simple as when you go, that you're able to take vacations, and you're able to take vacations because you worked so hard, got a bonus or got a promotion, or were able to work some overtime. Make the cause and effect of your hard work a little more known. Not that you want to take credit for it, not that you want people to feel like they don't, they wouldn't otherwise have these things, but I think when there's a connection, it makes things a lot easier. And third of all, this one's the psychologist in me certainly talking, make sure that you're equally interested in what your partner is doing, whether it's work, whether it's home, whatever their role is with your family. One of the reasons sometimes people complain about their partners needing to do so much at work is because they actually feel like their partner doesn't respect or care or want to listen to what their role is, what the other person's role is in the family, and sometimes doing that will actually help with both issues.
Ellen, here's a question. My 8-year-old gets upset when I can't make her weekday soccer games. She asks me, why do you choose work over me? I don't know how to respond.
Another great question, and one of the things that, and I'm assuming that the person who asked this question, the daughter is probably on the younger side, maybe 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years old. One of the things that I said before might help with this, which is really helping your daughter feel a part of your work. In other words, bring her to your office and have her draw a drawing that you're going to put on your wall, or talk about your work and what you do. So that's the first part. But I think the more important part, or the part that would be more powerful in this case, is having your daughter understand that she is absolutely your #1 priority, that she's your priority above and beyond work no matter what, and that sometimes, because there are other people that are able to take care of her and other people that can take her to that game or can watch her during that game, you do have to meet your obligations to your work, but you have to be very you have to say very strongly to your daughter that has nothing to do with what you would choose if faced with a choice. It just has to do with having to put in time at work when someone else can take care of her, so that you can spend time with her at a different time. Very good question.
Alan, we have time for just one last question. Should partners split chores at home even if one partner is working and one is not?
This is a great question. I think that more and more people are asking this question. And my answer is this. My answer is that there's a difference between how many chores people do and how time-consuming those chores are. When it comes to time spent, I think logistics should play a role. In other words, if someone is able to be home for, I'll make up the hours, if someone's able to be home for 40 hours and someone else is only able to be home for 20 hours, you divide the chores up so maybe both people have an equal number of chores, but the person who literally can be in the house more and has more of an opportunity to spend time might do something that's more time-consuming. Believe me, I don't mean harder. I just mean time-consuming. That way, the kids see which is probably the point of your question, the kids see that you live in a place where fathers and mothers, or whatever the partners, whoever is raising the kids, split things equally and both take responsibility for the house. But I do think logistics has to enter, because the problem could be that the person who's got to work 50 hours a week and then has to do the chores that take up more time may literally have no time for the kids or no time for other stuff.
Thank you, Alan, for those thorough responses to the questions. Our next webinar is June 13th, and it's titled school's out, making most of family vacations definitely timely for this time of year. To receive individualized parenting support, if you hear something today or during any of other webinars which strikes a chord with you that you think your family can use more individual support, please contact Terry Chebit at tchebit@jfcs.org or call her at 781-693-5669. We can arrange for individualized parenting support and consultations. You can also learn more about our parent consultation program at www.jfcsboston.org/parentsconsultations. That's actually parents, not parents. So again, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you will join us again on June 13th.